Okay, I've pressed it. Okay, we're now ready to go. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm the accountant. So this is the third episode of the Candid Talk series, and I'm joined by an award-winning auditor, Sagar Pau from BDO. Sagar, do you want to just talk about the award you got recently? You got an award, didn't you?
Nice, and firstly, thanks very much for the compliments. Award-wise, I didn't get any. I guess the award I got is to be a successful accountant. That's my personal award.
No, but you got nominated for a prize, didn't you?
Yeah. You're right, actually, Sinan. So basically, at BDO where I work, we have these quarterly awards. Like if you perform well, then you get an award for that. So yeah, I did get one recently. Which was, I think, a couple of months ago. So basically what they do is they see if you've gone sort of above or beyond, basically. So if you worked a lot longer than expect, like putting the extra hours, or if you thought something outside the box, or the different scenarios really. But yeah, so that was quite a nice gesture from the firm.
Okay, so what was your award for?
So this was a standard sort of quarterly bonus, basically. So basically one of the clients, they had a tight deadline. So I was working with the team to get the job over the line, and like that involved working extra hours. That involved working well with the team and dealing with the client requests in an orderly fashion.
Okay.
So that's the main gist of it.
Interesting. So we want to start off with how you became an accountant. So why don't you tell us how you got into accountancy and how you got into audit?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest with you, I actually did an accounting degree. So since the age of 18, 19, I was doing something accounting related. So it started off with that. And as part of the degree, I did a placement year at a very small accounting firm where they covered topics such as bookkeeping and assisting other ad hoc requests. And then completed the degree in accounting. Then did a couple of months in another accounting firm, then moved over to Moore Stephens, which is now BDO. So basically Moore Stephens is where I did my training contract. They then merged with BDO. And then in then basically since then I've been at BDO basically, and I've mainly been doing audit up till
Okay. I see. What made you go for an accountancy degree after you qualified from A levels? What made you go for that specifically? Did you always want to be an accountant, or?
Well, there was actually a combination of factors actually. Firstly, so I did A levels related to maths and economics, and those are the ones I was more interested in. And I've also heard of like relatives being accountants, and you hear good things about that. And when you add two and two together, those subjects that I just mentioned, along with accounting itself, they complement each other well. So it just seemed like the natural route.
Oh, okay.
And so I went into an accounting degree, but just to add something to that, there's no need to do an accounting degree if you want to be an accountant in the future. So Sinan, I don't know if you're going to cover that later on, but that's just a tip. Like, you don't have to do an accounting degree.
No, it does help though. But I mean, I sort of knew what you're getting yourself into. Okay, no, that's interesting. Who did you apply to when you were applying for ACA roles? Who did you apply to?
So I did apply to some of the big four, and as well as Moore Stephens, I applied to some smaller firms. And I was getting through the stages, but then once I got the offer from Moore Stephens, I just continued on with that. Then the others I got contacted by, I just said I've already found something, so I can't proceed with them really.
Okay, so what was your experience with the interviews? Were you talking to a manager, and then you had to do an assessment center? What sort of things were required for the different roles?
If I look at, like, generally speaking, the criteria was to do psychometrics. So that was like a verbal and numerical type exercise.
Yeah.
Most firms like to do that. Then it moved on to an interview stage. Firstly, depending on the firm, there was a telephone interview involved, but some firms they just went to a normal interview face to face. And if there was a telephone interview, then there was a second interview. If there was no telephone interview, then you just directly went into assessment center if you had the face-to-face interview. And then following on from the assessment center, generally speaking, you then get called to say whether you're offered or not. So that is like more or less what happens. Different firms have different variations to this. That's just like the average.
Okay. Do you have any tips for anybody doing interviews or assessment centers? I know I used to struggle with them.
So did I actually. Yeah, so in terms of interviews, one thing I would say is you just have to be yourself. Don't try and waffle, because interviewers can get the waffle. Like the thing is with an interview, I know it sounds very like fake, but it's true in the sense that although the employer is looking at whether you're a fit for the firm, you have to look at whether the employer is a fit for you. The only way you can do that is by being yourself, and you need to, and in that way you can ask the questions that you want to ask to understand more about them. And if through that there's a feeling that it's not going the right way, then that's positive. Then at least you're not going to a firm where you're not going to be valued or you're not going to enjoy. If through your questioning or your discussion with the employer, you show your interest, they show you the interest that you want to see from them. If that's going the right way, you're more likely to get the job, and the chance it's going to be a job that when you join, you're more likely to get the most out of it and enjoy.
Okay, that's wise advice actually. So I think what Sagar mentioned was quite good, which is to see the interview as a two-way process, where they're trying to test you, obviously, see whether you're personable, whether you have the right skills, but also there's also a good chance for you to see whether you like the people and you can see yourself working with them in the future.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
So
then in terms of the assessment centers, the other point you're asking.
Yeah.
Again, the key tip is a trap that some people get into is they try and talk too much to make themselves get heard. But the assessors are quite smart, so like they'll know when you're waffling too much. And if you waffle and add no value to the assessment center itself, which is the group exercise, then you're not gonna get very far. So basically, to summarize, assessment center is a key thing in an assessment center is like a group exercise, which most firms do.
Yeah.
Where there's 4 or 5 of you, and you get together, perform a task. Assessors want to see how good you are across a different variety of skill sets, such as working in a team, your contribution, your respect for others, how good a team player you are, different traits depending on what the firm's looking for. So it's sometimes better to not necessarily speak too much, but to speak a little bit less, but think about what you're saying and add in that way.
Yeah, I think it's just basically, if I understand correctly, it's just following what you're trying to get the task done. So sometimes, trying to get the task done, I guess, isn't it? You have to listen at times, but then you have to voice your opinion if you think that opinion is important, right?
Exactly. And voice your opinion, but in such a way that it doesn't disrespect another team member's viewpoint.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's quite key as well, actually, because then you fall into the trap of sounding too like I wouldn't say arrogant, but yeah, I mean arrogant. If you're wording it in such a way that doesn't sound very nice. So you need to give your point of view, but in the right way, in a respectful way.
Okay, that's good, wise advice. I think
then you'll progress far in that.
Yeah, I think it's quite, they can be quite fun to do. No, did you find them fun or did you find them stressful?
Sorry,
did you find them fun or did you find them quite stressful experiences, just the interview and the assessment center in general?
So I enjoyed the interview. Assessment center I did find challenging because I wasn't at that time used to being put in such situations.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that although let's say that there's 5 of you in the assessment center group exercise, there's no guarantee that they're going to appoint all 5 of you. They might have a cap of 2, for example, in the company. So they can only pick 2 out of the 5 or even 1 out of the 5. So
Okay, I see.
you have to somehow stand out from everyone else. And
Right.
just knowing, having that knowledge is a pressure in itself. So, and with interviews, I think I was good at interacting with people, more senior people. So I think that was something that I was generally better in. So I was less nervous about that.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's okay, cool. So we understand how you got in. How did you balance studying with working? When did you do your study? Did you do why don't you tell us actually, how did you balance your studying with, you know, actually working for the firm?
Yeah, so basically, like, the good thing with the studying bit was that the firm, like, it was more serious at the time. They were very helpful in like allowing us to study and work in a balanced way. So like we got some time off to study and we went to college. So I sort of made sure that I did my studying, like say for example, after college or in the weekends. And during the work days, when it was closer towards the exams, I made sure like it was sort of communicated that I had exams coming up. So like then that put me in a position where I wasn't made to do full on work. I was a lot like in a position to balance. And to be honest, like because when I was working, the team was small, so like people knew that I had exams, so they would consider it on that basis. One tip I'd give is like try and make your point clear that you have to focus on your studies at least on the days you've got college and on weekends,
Okay.
and hopefully evenings during work days.
Yes, I found that. I found that in the Moore Stevens firm, which I also went through, that Kate McCaffrey, who was overseeing the training, made sure that we had adequate time for, you know,
Exactly.
exam preparation.
Yeah, and it was nice.
Okay,
Like when I was doing it, it was nicely spaced out. So like we did 2 hour time initially, and in the finals we did 3 hour time. So the spacing was very nice. It was
cool,
well taken care of. So that was good.
great. Now, do you have any tips for actually revising for the exams? Do you have any
Yeah,
tips
one.
of how should
Yeah,
people be focusing their time?
absolutely. So one thing that I learned while doing the exams was spend less time like staring at the book, looking at theory, and focus your time on practicing the questions. It's very tempting not to practice the questions because it's just so much effort. But if you want to pass, that's the route to go to. Otherwise, very hard to pass
Yeah,
because without applying it, uh, you're not going to be prepared in the exam. So even
definitely.
if even if you start with just attempting half the question or quarter of the question, then gradually enhancing, just build that momentum of and build that mindset of actually practicing a question gradually, and then that'll be more efficient than just reading through blindlessly the theory, and that'll be like my opinion, quite a hopeless way of doing it.
Yes. How did you find the two? Did you use BPP? I used BPP. Did you also use BPP? How did you find the
So
tutor provider you used?
I use another tuition provider. They were very good. They were more bespoke. They were very bespoke. They had a limited class size, and the tutors were very friendly. And also, like you could even ask them questions like after the class or during the class, during lunch breaks. So that was very beneficial to me as well. Because the thing with the content is, although it's not the most technically demanding you'll see in your life, like I'm sure there are other fields or other disciplines which have more intense material or more technically demanding study material. Doing the ACA is demanding because you have to do it in such a short space of time. So technical content is reasonably tough, but the time frame in which you have to study it is even more tougher. That can make it a very difficult challenge. So having that guidance at college was helpful. And I think, so, as you mentioned, Kate McCaffrey, like in the in Moore Stevens, TDPs were quite handy, and she sort of showed to us how Moore Stevens were like a supportive firm in terms of studying for trainees. So a combination of these things really helped.
Okay. And in terms of the college, how did the delivery of the content differ from your provider compared to your university studies?
Okay, yeah. So firstly, like in university, for example, your lectures were like a few times a week, an hour here or there. But because the same, so basically, like because I did accounting, I can give a good insight into the sense that something that you probably take a year or year and a half, you probably have to cram in a few weeks of ACA studying. So that's how different it was. So it was more intense in the college, in the ACA tuition providers college, in the sense that it was 9 to 5 every day, Monday to Friday, and 2 weeks on the trot sometimes. So you had to focus more basically, and you had to study harder for it.
Yeah. No, I see your point actually. I think the good thing I found about the tuition for the ACA is that you don't have to write copious amounts of notes.
Exactly.
I think they give you their version of the notes and you just annotate them, and I think that
exactly.
saves
So
a lot of
basically,
time, doesn't it?
they make briefer versions of the study manual. Obviously, study manual is handy because it might be, I mean, no study tuition providers, if they're gonna condense the like study manual, or if they're gonna like make their own version of the syllabus in a way that's accessible to students, absolutely everything, it won't be the case that absolutely everything will be covered. So the study manual as a guide is definitely important to have. But given the fact that there's such limited time, tuition providers such as the one that I went to, they provided a very handy set of notes, so which made it like easy to read. And I used it more and more as I went through the course because I just found it very helpful. Even more so when it was some exams are open book. So even more so for those sorts of exams, it was quite handy.
Okay, sweet. How did you find the firm from a social side? Like, did you get on very well with your intake? Are you still in touch with your intake?
Yeah. So yeah, the thing is with when I joined, it was mid year and there were only 4 or 5, but we formed an amazing bond. So we got on really well. When had lots of socials together in our small little group that we formed, and as well as that, I took part in the socials of the wider firm when they had it, because the whole culture was very good in that respect. But yeah, like in my intake, although there were 3 or 4 people, like we had such an amazing time, like one of the best times getting to know each other. Then obviously a couple of years later, I met a guy called Sinan Ahmed, and like I became really good friends with him. So that's another advantage of coming to Moore Stephens. I met Sinan, and we were amazing friends, and we keep in touch till this day, as is evident.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we went for I had my 30th recently, and Sagar and his wife came over. We met in London, so that was good fun. I think definitely, no, I agree with you, is that you're around people. I think the good thing about ACA is that you're around people of a similar age.
Exactly.
Definitely. And you do form good relationships.
Yeah. And it's like one of the things where like people often ask, there's practice, then there's industry, pros, cons. I mean, you could go on all day talking about that, but I think in practice, in an accounting firm such as ours, you're more likely to get a group of people in with the similar sort of background. There's more scope to socialize there. I mean, obviously, I've not been in industry, so I can't specifically comment, but this is from what I've been hearing. Like, what I gauge from what people's views are, really.
And visiting clients as well, probably. Like, you'll see that like a client will only have a specific number, a smaller number of people, right, compared to an accountancy practice.
You can sense from that as well. And yes, so that's one of the more pro aspects of working in a practice, I would say.
Okay, excellent. So why don't you explain to us how you found working? How did you find your start to audit when you first went on to audits? How did you find the experience? Were you supported? Was it a steep learning curve? And what would you have liked to know? Actually, no, we'll start with what you found, how you found your initial experience of doing audit.
Yeah, so before I went on to audit, like I was always quite curious or like quite excited by the idea of going to client sites. I don't know why, but it just, the idea of that sort of excited me. Probably because like when I was doing my placement year, my boss, my manager, he was always like liaising with clients and interacting, and it seemed quite cool. So like so that's why I was quite, when coming onto the audit program, I was quite curious for that. So basically when I first joined and going into my first audit, I was obviously nervous because I don't know what was coming of me, like, and then when you have training, like you obviously told like you meant to be presentable and be professional. So I was a bit like a bit conscious of those sorts of things. So but luckily, I mean, like the first audit I went to, my team, like two more senior people, they were quite supportive, and it was quite, I really liked the experience. And even when I felt I may have made a mistake, they were quite helpful in helping me deal with it. So that's really good. And it's obviously a challenge because you're going onto a new client site. You have to learn about the some of the systems relating to finance and how some of the systems work, how they operate. So, and obviously with audits, it's a cycle of a certain period of time, say 2 weeks, and then you move on to the next one. So it's always a challenge. But yeah, it was a very good experience to have.
Cool. And were people supportive? I mean, like, if you were you sort of told to solve things on your own, or did your senior step in if you had a question and tell you how to solve something?
So seniors did step in, and they did try and help to address the question and help guide me. I guess one tip I can give to potential newcomers is like, as you get more experienced, like maybe not in the first few weeks, but as you get more experienced and you have basic ideas of how things work, one thing to like accelerate your learning is to, like, when you've got a problem, do ask a question, definitely ask a question, but when you're asking the question, come up with an initial solution, and then that'll make the senior or the manager think that you've thought about what's going on, you've been proactive. So that's one advice I'd give.
Okay, that's a good one. Problem solving, yes.
Yeah, obviously when you're completely brand new, you won't have the ability to do that because you don't really know what's going on at the time. So you can't really do that. So you'll have to just ask. But then as you get the basics, get some understanding, then that's a good thing to do, and that'll accelerate your growth.
Interesting. How did you find clients, and how did you find clients in general? Were they quite open and friendly, or did you find were they a mixed bag, really, depending on which client you were at?
I would say that, yeah, it would be a mixed bag. Majority of them, to be fair, were reasonable and friendly, but obviously the nature of audit is such that sometimes it's tighter deadlines than normal. So it's you might find some clients who might be slightly more challenging to interact with, liaise with, but you just have to try and stay calm, be open with them, with the progress, and try and get the answers you need from them. But I think you'll get that in audit across the board. And as I said, majority of them were good, were reasonable, like were approachable.
Excellent. That's good to know. What computer programs are you using on a day? Actually, generally, like, or maybe just explain the change. What sort of computer programs are you using on a day-to-day basis?
So we use accounting packages, and Excel. Excel is a key thing that we use. Obviously Word. Then, like in audit, we use the audit softwares that the firm provide. So obviously Moore Stephens was another one. Then BDO was another one after the merger. Yeah, and the audit software works in two folds actually. So documentation management, and also just organizing the different audit sections, so you can put your working papers there. and audit checklists, which include work programs which you need to address as part of the audit.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So
one thing to know is that it would be a good idea to increase your knowledge on Excel, because although I think for audit you just really need the basics, but these days in like audit and accounting in general, efficiency is becoming a bigger thing. So like through Excel, there's ways of making your life more easier and doing things more efficiently. So that'll be one to develop your knowledge on, and yeah, you could surprise your colleagues.
Definitely, like sometimes I think I found myself using VLOOKUP or SUMIF. I used to end up using SUMIF formulas a lot, right?
Yeah.
You might find the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. So some of these can be really handy, especially when dealing with large data sets.
Definitely.
So I felt like if I grasp the slightly more intermediate or more advanced levels of Excel earlier on, then that could have saved a fair bit of time. So the key is like learn it. Don't think that, oh, I'm wasting my time learning, I need to get on my work. Make the investment now. Learn the Excel, the relevant advanced or intermediate features, and then hopefully that should pay dividends.
Pay dividends. Trying accounting jokes already.
Absolutely. This is an accounting interview, Sinan.
Fair enough.
It's another test I'm taking off from the audit checklist.
Okay, so why don't you tell us what does an auditor do? So don't just tell us in very basic English. What is an audit team doing when they're going to a client site? What are they actually checking?
So basically, client needs to prepare financial statements every year. These financial statements or accounts are to be shown to investors or other stakeholders. Auditor comes onto the audit site to make sure that the financial statements make sense or are fair. And they need to look at the accounts, they need to look at the underlying records. They need to be satisfied over the key trial balances or the key financial statement balances and disclosures. So that's the job of an auditor, basically.
Okay, so just feeding on Sagar's point, really. I don't know if you found this, but generally, when you come to the client site, they wouldn't have had the financial statements ready.
Yeah.
So what you instead have is the actual accounting records.
Yeah.
Like no, as you said. So you're given what's called a trial balance, which has your main balance, which has all the balances and the transactions on it, right? Like you have the assets, you have the liabilities, the equity, revenue, expenses, and then you're checking whether those figures are understated, overstated. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely that. So so these trial balances. So they will probably have some sort of supporting documentation, whether that be invoices, receipts, agreements, or whatever they are. You need to tie back relevant balances or underlying transactions to support. That's a key part. Or we could go on all day about what's an audit, but
yeah, exactly.
There's many angles to it. But yeah, you're basically making sure that the balances make sense or are fair and reasonable.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's a good point.
And make sure the audit file has adequate evidence to support it.
Okay. Okay, so we've got, okay, cool. Good. What was I going to say? No, there's a fair point, actually. No, that's correct. And I think what we're also generally, I think the basic rule, which is not always true, but companies will generally tend to try and overstate their asset values, and understate the liabilities or the monies they owe. So, or is that?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? To some extent, yeah. The general thing is that what you said, but then it depends on the risk of the company as well. There might be some differences depending on the risk. So when you do an audit, you often have a planning of the audit where these areas should be covered, what your discussion that should be covered. and it's led by the partner or the responsible individual, RI. And where you keep it is just understanding the risks, where the risks are, and whether there is that is an overstatement or understatement.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. And I guess there's also the check. You're also checking fraud. Assessing the risk of fraud as well. Checking that the revenue is not fictitious and these kinds of things, right?
So if you pick up on something during your audit, then it's something you might need to explore further on. So yeah.
Sweet. Okay, cool. So how did work change when you moved
And also
from?
and I guess just to also emphasize, in audit, there's more ever evolving regulations, so there's more and more work to be done on certain sections to assess the risk of fraud, to assess the risk of misstatement, or I think risk in general, like whatever that may be. So that's just one point to know. So it's
Yeah,
intense regulation.
that's true, because quite a lot of there's a lot of scrutiny on audits because quite a lot of companies have gone bankrupt or gone into liquidation, even though they've received a good opinion from the auditors.
Yeah.
So especially we have one of the tests we have to do. Well, one of the assessments we have to make is to see whether the company will continue 1 year after the financial statements are completely signed off.
Exactly.
And that can be quite subjective.
Yeah.
And that can be a key risk for some companies, not always though. But that's one of the areas that audit firms get a bit shaky about, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's move on to you being you progressing towards your qualification. So you would have moved from associate to a senior. How was the transit? How did the work change when you? How was the work different from when you were a senior compared to when you were an associate?
So I mean, to be honest, like in a firm like Stevens or BDO, it's not the case that you have to basically they give you the opportunity to have some early responsibility. So it's not the case that as soon as you're qualified, then your role changes.
Yeah.
The transition is slightly more accelerated, and it depends on your capabilities. So I was involved in aspects of senioring earlier on. Obviously, you get support from the relevant people, but I was so there was so basically what I'm trying to say is that the moment I qualified, it wasn't the case that my role actually changed. I was doing some of the work earlier on with the support. So that's what I'd say to that. And obviously there's lots of responsibility involved in that.
Okay, no, I agree with you.
People you need, juniors or associates or semi-seniors, you need to direct or assist with them, and you obviously have to report to the managers. And yeah, so there is more responsibility, but I think it's good progression.
No, definitely. Like I think you get, especially I found myself doing some audits on my own, which was quite a good experience. I don't know if you found the same, where you were given small clients audits to do by yourself.
Yeah, there were times where I was given that as well, and that's quite a good experience. So then you could just sort of keep your head down and work on that audit. And it's that, yeah, exactly.
Although I think I find audits where you're working with more people a bit more fun, a bit more work. You can delegate the more repetitive sections too, right?
Exactly. And if you got a good team, then you don't mind putting in some sort of extra hours to work towards the end goal, and if there's a good fun working environment which is very friendly,
cool,
then you need to work more,
Did it test your patience though, and your associates would ask you multiple questions, or did you enjoy the coaching side of it?
I actually did enjoy the coaching side. The only challenge was where I didn't know the answer myself. Then I either needed to think about it or look into it and get back to them, or have maybe ask someone else and go back to them. But some of that would take time, and then I sometimes thought, do I know the answer, or do I need to approach someone or try and find something out before I go back to them. Sometimes that element of coaching was challenging, but overall I quite like the coaching element.
Okay, excellent. That's good to
Yeah.
know. And when you progressed to assistant manager, how did you find the transition, and what was different about being an assistant manager compared to being an audit senior?
So obviously with the assistant manager role, there you've got multiple jobs that you have to look into. What one similarity was that when you're a senior, there are occasions where jobs overlap, and so there were times when I was a senior where I was looking at 2, potentially sometimes 3, like I was actually looking into 2 or 3 different jobs at a similar time. So I did have some experience of that element. So it wasn't like a drastic change, but with an assistant manager, there's obviously more of that, and there's a real expectation that you look into 3 or 4 at the same time. But then the challenge was at the same time is that when you make the move into assistant manager, there are some jobs where you're actually senioring or completing your senioring cycle as well. So like
Very difficult to manage.
then you might be expected to manage a couple of others, and then so that's where the difficulty lied. But it's an interesting transition, and then the next stage would be manager, with like there's even more jobs, but no senioring. I guess even in assistant manager level as well, like after a certain point in time, you would stop senioring and focus on a portfolio.
Okay, cool. We've got 2 minutes left, so let's just focus on the valuation side of the business. Valuation. So you moved into valuations after doing audit. How have you found your experience in valuation so far?
Yeah, so currently I'm on a secondment to valuations, and really enjoying it. So like I've been on the audit support side, so that's really interesting, and apparently there's more interesting bits to come. So I've not been there for too long, but very positive so far. Very technical, so there's a steep learning curve, one which I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I'm always very curious. How does this happen? How does that happen? So one of the things I'm trying to do is just be a little bit patient, thinking I'll understand it. I'll get there.
That's good advice. So yeah, I think I remember somebody saying to me that accountancy firms are a bit like supermarkets, because you don't just have to stay in the service line that you're in. You can branch out, right? You don't have to stay in audit for the rest of your career. There are always opportunities to branch out, but you have to, because of under-resourcing, I imagine, you have to communicate early if you want to move, right?
Yeah, so that's firm by firm. Unfortunately, BDO were extremely supportive of that. So like they were willing to allow me to explore the opportunity. Obviously, like they wouldn't want it to impact the business needs within audit. But yeah, they were very supportive. And then you just have to, if you want something, you have to ask for it.
Okay, cool. Great. So I think we're going to wrap it up there, but thanks for hopping on the call.
No worries. It's my pleasure, Sinan.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, enjoy your holiday in Antalya. We'll maybe have another video about
that. Potentially,
and then
yeah.
you stumble, right?
I'll send a picture over to you. Yeah.
Great. Send the pictures over, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Great. Cheers. Thanks and have a good evening, yeah? Don't work too hard tomorrow.
I'll try not to.